you, and thank you everyone for your patience, for waiting, and thank you, Frank, for making an epic journey from, where were you come from, Paris, was it?
No, I came from London, but the first flight was cancelled, the second flight was delayed, and then we had an electric car malfunction that required us to visit every station in Gorey, so... but we're all fine.
We're all good, and I'll try to make it really easy.
You see, I told Jackie last time, you need to do what you do at Hay Festival. The important people come in by helicopter. Ian McEwan told me.
Well, we know for the next time. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our two very special guests. So born in Abidjan, a biochemist by training, Gauz arrived in France in 1999 for the official reason of finishing his studies and for the unofficial reason of seeing elsewhere. He started as a screenwriter in 2004, then became a documentarian, photographer, director of an economic newspaper, editor-in-chief of a web magazine, and winner of literary prizes. Since 2011, he returned to live in the Ivory Coast, where he set up a publishing house, and through his meetings and his writings, he now shares his life between Grand-Bassam and the rest of the world. His debut novel, Debut Payé, translation Standing Heavy, was translated into English by Frank. Standing Heavy was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize in 2023. His most recent novel, Comrade Papa, also translated by Frank, has been heralded by English language media as among the best translation fiction of 2024. Frank Wynne was born in Sligo and has spent the last 25 years as a literary translator from French and Spanish. His authors include Michel Houellebecq, Virginie Despentes, Alice Senateur, and Gauz. His work has earned him numerous awards and prizes, including the Dublin Literary Award twice, which we will talk about later, in 2002 and again in 2022, and this year's French American Prize. So welcome to you both. I'm looking forward to talking to you both. I'm going to start with you, Gauz. So many of the people here may not be familiar with your writing and your background, so I'd love you to set the scene for us. What was your childhood and your early years like? Can you tell us where you grew up and how you ended up in France as a young man?
That's a long
big question.
That's a long program to tell. Let me make you notice that the nigger was not late. It was the white man. It was the white man, and I will tell it to for the first time, and I am very happy of that.
Yeah.
But somehow Frank is like a Negro, like us, because he have a mind, and it is okay to be late when you are like this. When you are designed like this, it is okay to be late, and for me, it is not a caricature, but it is okay. And thank you for your patience. I grew up in. That is complicated. I grew up in a lot of places, because my parents were. I didn't live my early years with my parents. They were in France studying, so I grew up in many places, and it was okay. I wasn't being mistreated like it was very cool. No problem with that. And my grandmom was very involved in during this moment of my education, and later I went to see my parents in France and then be schooled in Ivory Coast, and I was quite good at school, so that people decided for me to continue my studies in France, but I didn't go. At the time they decided for that, and years later go there and live there for 11 years, and then come back to Côte d'Ivoire. I began to be a writer when coming back, after coming back from France. I hope that means maybe I had something to say to the world. I have tried to be a film director in France. It is complicated to a white French man or woman to be a film director, a good one in France. So that it was way more complicated for me. and, and paradoxally, coming back in Côte d'Ivoire, being I have written Standing Heavy when coming back in Côte d'Ivoire, and then just after that, Comrade Papa, coming back and being an author and a novelist, make me legitimate.
Yeah, legitimate. Yeah.
Legitimate
Yeah.
to be a film director or scenarist in France. That is quite paradoxal, but I think I have done the good choice to go back and tell my thing to the world from the place I was born.
Thank you. We're going to talk a bit about Standing Heavy in a minute, but I'll just go to Frank now. So Frank, how does a young man from Sligo become one of the most prolific translators in the world, award-winning? I know it's a long journey via France and London and comics and graphic novels. Can you give us a little flavour for anybody who might not be familiar with your work, how you ended up here?
Maybe half the people in this room lived through the 1970s in Ireland. So, like most of us, we just got the hell out as fast as possible. And if you were a young gay man growing up in Ireland in the 1970s and 1980s, then I had no desire to be here. I loved my childhood in Sligo. It was lovely. But when I went to college originally, when I went to TCD, which I did not complete, I thought, okay, I'm finally moving away. And I'd phone my mother, and she'd say, "Oh, so you were, here on Thursday night?" And I said, "What?" "Oh, yeah, no, your cousin said, that he's." And I thought, this is not far enough. So I worked briefly for Radio Nova because somebody had to, and it was quite fun. And then when that fell through, I told all my friends I was moving to Paris. I had never been to Paris. I'd never been to France. And again, if you studied during the 1970s, you'll know that there was no oral French if you were studying French for leaving cert. So I arrived speaking the way that Maupassant wrote in about 1870. Much hilarity ensued. There's a long way after that. I mean, I had no idea what qualifications you needed in order to be a translator, but I was pretty sure I didn't have them. The very first thing that I ever translated, I translated because I wanted my friends to read it and no translation was published. It was a book called La vie devant soi,
Which I will be asking you about
by
later.
Émile Ajar, pseudonym for Romain Gary. But it was another 10 years, I translated graphic novels, I published graphic novels, I helped build the internet, I apologise, and by the time I was working for AOL, building the internet, I was beginning to do some translation work, but I was still working. I did evenings and weekends. So I came in to work one day. At the age of whatever it was, 33, I was the second oldest person in the company because that's what the internet was. And somebody came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you have to read this book, you have to read this book," and hands me a copy of Atomized. And I said, "Have you looked at the title page?" And he hadn't. I've read this book several times, so many times I've actually translated it. And basically around about then I decided that that I loved doing it, and that I wanted to do that and nothing else. So with a mere 70% cut in salary, I was on my way to possibly making a living 7 years later.
Okay, we'll get back to the making a living from translation later on. Gauz, I'd like to talk to you firstly about this book, Standing Heavy. So this book was published in French 10 years ago now, 2014, as Debut Payé, am I pronounced? I have to apologise for my French pronunciation. I'm really sorry about it.
Debut Payé, it's good.
Yeah, and it's about, for anybody who hasn't read it, it's about, so there's a couple of different storylines, but there's 3 young men who come from the Côte d'Ivoire to Paris, working as security men. Ferdinand arrives in the 1960s, and then a few decades later we meet Kassoum and Ossery, and then there's an interesting structure then, because within the book itself, then there's these chapters where we get the observations of the security guard working, and that's really interesting. But before I get you to read a little bit in French, and Frank is going to read the translation to give you an idea of it, can you talk to us about the inspiration for that? Because I know you worked as a security guard, so I'm guessing a lot of the idea is your own experience. Is that right?
Of course, every book everyone writes, you put some of you into a book, but we are in the fiction.
Yeah.
And people in France 10 years ago, because I am like I am, strong, black, and talking about security guard, the storytelling was that the security guard who have write a good book. It was wrong, but you can't do nothing about storytelling of press. It was exactly the opposite, but it was a writer who were a security guard. That is a thing. And this writer was a black man in France. And the lonely job, for the first time when you are black, you will, and strong like me, you will not have the problem to have a job as a security guard. So the racism functioned. It was good for me for the first time. And that was and then you go to this security, to this shop, Camailleux, Sephora. You go there. You are in the temple, in the church of the capitalism. On Sephora, nobody buys some food. It is not important. It is for the image. And as a security guard being there, you understand quickly that you are useless. That is the term, useless. You are, for the first time, you are there not because of the money, not because of the steals, le vol.
No, not because of theft or shoplifting.
It is not because of theft. Because people don't rob things. Mm-hmm. People don't. Yes, for sure. Like 99% of people don't rob things in the shops because we are designed like this. People are naturally good. People don't rob. So when you ask yourself, why are you here? And one more thing, it is prévu, comment on dit prévu?
It's expected, or it is.
It is expected in a shop that like 1% of thing can be stolen. So it is not a big deal. Even if there is no cashier, people will pay because we are all the world tell you have to consume. All the world. That is the purpose of your life. So when you go there, you are accomplishing something great, fundamental for you. You are not. That is the world we live in.
Yeah.
That is the world we live
Capitalist.
in. And this security guard take conscience of that and just begin to speak about his uselessness. Mm-hmm. His uselessness. Why are you here? So why a security guard exists in Sephora? He exists like a package. It is a good thing to have a great black man for the image. He is the product too. Mm-hmm. He is the product too. For the big guy, I can afford to put a big guy. Be quiet, people. Be quiet. No, don't worry. There is a big black guy, well dressed, to protect you. You know that you are not there for protection of nobody, no one. So it is okay, but and that was the security guard begins to do what to explain why people come what people come for consumption.
Yeah.
Consumption, and that was my dispositif.
That was, yes,
set
yeah.
up.
Sorry?
Mon dispositif, mon.
That was your plan. That was what you were trying to do was to.
And as a security guard, nobody can see, nobody pay attention. So you are the perfect points of observation of the people.
Yeah, you can take it all in because you're watching all day.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
I was just there for 1 month to pay myself a ticket to go back to Abidjan quickly, and I have seen this and say to myself, and you have the time, begin to take some notes. One day I will write a story of this crazy thing. For the first time, as an observer, I see the absurdity of all those things. You used to go there and you are the consumer, so you don't see yourself.
Yeah.
But from the point of view of a security guard, the black security guard, who is ignored by everyone, who is useless, it was the perfect point of view to catch those stories and make something with them later.
So were you taking notes when you were there, or was it when you went back to the Côte d'Ivoire? It was all in your head.
Just before going back, I was in a hurry, like no more friends, no more friends. In 2011, there will be this war happen. This war in Abidjan, and the French army was to bomb my own neighborhood in Abidjan, and I was. No, that is a nonsense. I have to go back. People need me there and not in France.
Yeah.
And so to go, I decided you have to pay a ticket, plane ticket, and it is quick to have a job like a security guard and work just 1 month and buy your ticket. And that is what I did. So when I began to write this novel, it was like comment on dit en comptabilité
Well, it was an account.
un solde de tout compte. Un solde de tout compte.
It was a reckoning. It was both an account but also a reckoning of what had happened.
It was that, like, okay, I will resume all my living in France with something original and not a big book with great sentences, but just finding some subtle way and funny way.
It's very funny.
To speak about it, because people are funny.
I think because a lot of people mightn't have read it, it might be nice now to get a flavour of the book. So,
excuse me for my English, but
no.
But it's crazy to see myself speaking in English. Crazy.
So Gauz is going to read the opening of Standing Heavy in French, and then Frank is going to read the translation. So whenever you're ready.
Je m'arrête à Petit Négris.
Oui.
Comme ça. Prologue. Nouvelle recrue. La longue file d'hommes noirs qui montent dans ces escaliers étroits ressemble à une cordée inédite à l'assaut du K2, le redoutable sommet de la chaîne himalayenne. L'ascension est rythmée par le seul bruit des pas sur les marches. Les escaliers sont raides, les genoux montent haut. 9 marches, un palier, plus 9 marches supplémentaires font un étage. Les pas sont feutrés par un épais tapis rouge déplié exactement au milieu d'une cage trop étroite pour laisser passer 2 hommes côte à côte. La cordée s'étire avec les étages et la fatigue. On entend souffler de temps en temps. Au 6e étage, le premier de cordée appuie sur le gros bouton d'un interphone cyclope surmonté de l'objectif noir d'une caméra de surveillance. Le grand bureau où tout le monde se retrouve en sueur est un open space. Aucune cloison n'arrête le regard jusqu'à une cage de verre sur laquelle 2 lettres marquent le territoire du mâle dominant des lieux, DG. Une baie vitrée offre gracieusement la vue sur les toits de Paris. Distribution de formulaires à tour de bras. Ici, on recrute. On recrute des vigiles. Protect 75 vient d'obtenir de gros contrats de sécurité pour diverses enseignes commerciales de la région parisienne. Son besoin en main-d'œuvre est immense et urgent. Le bruit s'est vite répandu dans la communauté africaine. Congolais, Ivoiriens, Maliens, Guinéens, Béninois, Sénégalais, etc. L'œil exercé identifie facilement les nationalités par le seul style vestimentaire. La combinaison polo jeans Levi's 501 des Ivoiriens, le blouson cuir noir trop grand des Maliens, la chemise rayée fourrée près du ventre des Béninois et des Togolais, les superbes mocassins toujours bien cirés des Camerounais, les couleurs improbables des Congolais de Brazza et le style outrancier des Congolais de Stanley. Dans le doute, c'est l'oreille qui prend le relais, car dans la bouche d'un Africain, les accents que prennent la langue française sont des marqueurs d'origine aussi fiables qu'un chromosome 21, en trop pour identifier le mongolisme ou une tumeur maligne pour diagnostiquer un cancer. Les Congolais modulent, les Camerounais chantonnent, les Sénégalais psalmodient, les Ivoiriens saccadent, les Béninois et les Togolais aussi, les Maliens petits négrisent.
So,
Merci.
thank you. One quick point. So, the original title, De vous payer, refers to people who are paid to stand. So when he's talking about the fact that as a security guard, and especially as a black security guard, you are an emblem that is protection / security. You're not expected to do anything. God forbid you should do anything. And so the entire group refer to themselves as ebullient. They're paid to stand. In the community of black security guards in the UK, they refer to what they do as standing heavy, which is why I called it standing heavy, because they're paid to stand and to look heavy, as in threatening. So, prologue. New recruits. The black men mounting the narrow staircase looked like climbers roped together for an assault on K2, the most fearsome peak in the Himalayas. Their ascent is punctuated only by the sound of feet on stairs, footsteps muffled by the thick red carpet laid precisely in the middle of the stairwell, so narrow that 2 men cannot pass. The steps are steep and knees are raised high. 9 treads, a landing, then 9 more, 1 floor. With each floor, the weary mountaineers become more spaced out. From time to time, there comes the sound of someone catching his breath. Reaching the 6th floor, the first in line presses the button of the cyclopean intercom, its lone eye the black lens of a security camera. The vast office in which they now find themselves, bathed in sweat, is open plan. No walls interrupt the space between the men, and the glass cage is emblazoned with 3 letters that mark the territory of the dominant male, CEO. A huge picture window generously affords a view over the rooftops of Paris. Forms are handed out left, right and centre. Here they are recruiting. They are recruiting security guards. Project 75 has just been granted several major security contracts for a variety of commercial properties across Paris. They are in urgent need of massive manpower. Word quickly spreads through the African community. Congolese, Ivoirians, Malians, Guineans, Beninese, Senegalese. The keen eye can identify each country by its style of clothing. The polo shirt and Levi 501 combo is the Ivorian. The baggy leather jacket is the Malian. The striped shirts tucked below the paunches of the Beninese and the Togolese. The beautiful, perfectly polished moccasins, that would be the Cameroonians. The preposterous colours of the Congolese from Brazzaville and the outrageous style of the Congolese from Kinshasa. If there's any doubt, the ear takes over, because in the mouths of Africans, the intonations of the French language are markers that designate origin as reliably as the 3rd copy of chromosome 21 indicates Down syndrome, or a malignant tumour denotes cancer. The Congolese modulate, the Cameroonians sing-song, the Senegalese chant, the Ivorians falter, the Beninese and the Togolese waver, and the Malis speak pidgin.
Thank you both. So Frank, when you were, first of all, how do you get a book to translate? Does it come from the publisher, the agent? Do you get to choose? How does that?
I get to choose more now than I used to. I get to choose what I don't want to do. By and large, okay, so the standard phrase is that only between about 3 and 5% of books published in the English language are in translation. This compares to 26% of all books published in French, or 27% of all books published in German. We simply don't translate very much. Linguistic hegemony means that we don't feel we need to anymore. We translated much more in the 19th century and the early 20th century because we felt we needed to. What happens generally is that publishers and editors are interested in what is called front list, something that has just been published, recently. If you want to go to them and say, I desperately want to translate this book that was published in 1977, there is one that I'm specifically thinking of that I still have not been able to translate. The only 2 words that might get you there are lost classic, because there's nothing a publisher likes more than a lost classic. So no, broadly speaking, people come to me. I decided quite early on that I was very interested in French's plural. So when I'm asked, I say I translate from French's plural and Spanish's plural into English's plural, actually. Because actually the difference between Algerian French, Lebanese French, Togolese French, Ivorian French, Guadeloupean or Martiniquais are enormously rich and very interesting, and I like playing with them. But I mean, this was offered to me, and I read it, and I understood that this is someone who both understands and plays with language and subverts the experience. I mean, when Gauz said earlier that that when this was published, it's like, shock, security guard writes novel. But as he said, actually, novelist works as security guard, But also this, his style does not fit what either French readers or indeed English readers both expect and sort of want from African writers. What they want is, if you are from Rwanda, we want you to write about the genocide. If you're from Algeria, we want you to write about the dirty war. If you're from, and it's basically what we want is, please give us a potted history of your entire culture in one slim volume so I never have to read a book from your country again. The notion that you have a black African writer who is a satirist and who is satirizing French society and equally satirizing the layers and layers of French cultures within French society was like, I'm not sure you're allowed to do that. So yeah, I really wanted to do this one.
Perfect. And because you do satirize French society, I'm wondering what was the reaction in the French-speaking world when you published Debut Payé, when it came out first? Was there any
no problem.
negative reaction to it?
No, nobody has problem with intelligence, and most of the time they used to say like I am an anthropologist, a reverse anthropologist. What a pretension! For them the right way it is from here to there. And you cannot look at them as a society, as a scientist, like entomologists. And then they say that, but I used to make fun with that. And anthropologists, yes, of course. As a writer, you are, of course, an anthropologist, and you know, it's left, you know, the good ones. The good ones told to me, you are a reverse anthropologist. This, imagine the racist one.
Yeah, so when it came out, it took 10 years for the translation from French, or 8 years maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't take that long to translate.
Well, no, I mean,
slow though I
mean,
am.
it was published in 2014, but the English translation.
Lazy.
Frank is very slow.
I am, yeah.
What is that because different factors? I guess.
Basically, it didn't come. So it was published in the UK by Christopher McElhose, and Christopher is one of the few editors these days who publishes authors rather than books. And I think if you don't publish authors, then you shouldn't be publishing at all. Because most authors take time before they find an audience, or before you find an audience for them, and you have to believe in them. And therefore you need to know that there is more than one book, and that you're going to stick with this author. The alternative, and it is very common, is, oh look, somebody's just written a book about blah, we'll publish it. I remember years and years ago, maybe 20 years ago now, I was at a book event drinking very warm, very mediocre white wine, and somebody said, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a translator. He said, I'm an editor. We did a translated book once, it didn't work.
Wow.
And that's it, you know. It's, you know, this is, it falls into the whole thing of, we now look at, we talk about world literature. I do not talk about world literature. Literature is just literature. And English literature is quite a small part of it.
Yeah.
The fact that we happen to read more English is not part of that. World literature makes it sound like the fancy bit in the Tesco aisle where you buy the nori seaweed and the ponzu dressing. However, the lasagna and the pizza are over in the white people's food aisle. So it isn't exotic, it isn't good for you, it's not cod liver oil, it's not supposed to make you more intelligent. There are funny, clever and intelligent books written in all languages, and there are moronic, stupid and please don't read me novels written in all languages. So what you do, and what Christopher has always done, is find an author and say, I want this author and I will stay with this author.
So they were waiting for Gauz to publish a few books?
Well, they wanted to see, how it would be received originally, not just in France, but elsewhere, and then they would wait for another one. They couldn't know that he was just going to keep on, you know, writing them. So actually I have a third one to deliver by the end of this year.
Oh, brilliant.
And then there's a fourth one which came out earlier this year, which I have to start next year. So, you know.
And do you like that when you get to work with the same writer over a number of years? Like, do you build up a relationship? I'd like to know a bit more about how you worked on these books. Do you work on your own and just ask questions when you...
No, I mostly work on my own and ask questions.
And that is great. That is great for me. And we don't have to exchange. You know, you are a translator. You are on your own. Like I was on my own while writing, and I think that is normal.
So when the English translation comes out, does it feel like your book, or does it feel like Frank's book? It's Frank's interpretation of your words. So how do you feel about these books now in the English language?
I have never asked this question even to myself. So you know, it is a book. A book. It's already a book. You know? And he has his own life, his own signification. Frank is very brave, because every book I write is so different from the precedent. So different.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Comrade Papa is light years from stylistically, the history, the time, no, it is very different from Standing Heavy.
Yes.
And there is a third one, Black Man, which is stylistically another thing. You know, I have pushed the style very, very, very further. You know, and Frank is always there. So It's okay. It's a brave one. You know, a normal translator would have died from the second book. You know, I have invented a language in Comrade Papa. Even the French have some difficulties to understand all the subtleties of what I have written. Another translator will be like, "Ah, okay, okay, I'm done with this one," you know. And there is the fifth book. It's like a theater, you know, but it is not theater. And my last book happens in a church.
Oh, okay. Need to get you back
In
for
a
that
church.
one.
In a church.
Well, Frank-
Like a Catholic church.
Okay, okay, interesting. Well, Frank, you mentioned why you wanted to translate Standing Heavy, but were there any challenges that that particular book presented when you went to translate it? I know you read the book from cover to cover first, don't you? And then
Standing Heavy. Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, there are a number of very different registers within it. So you have the very sort of didactic, the observations of the security guards as it's made, which is they're little aperçus, they're clever, they're sometimes quite funny. But then you have, you know, a section set in the very idealistic 1960s where those coming to France hoped and genuinely believed that they could have a better life, and then, as he so brilliantly depicts, spend all of their time in a student house talking about which brand of Marxism they want to adhere to, and not actually doing anything. So they spend all of their time voting on motions that they're going to send to various governments, which they never actually send. Meanwhile, what the rest of them do is they work as security guards. But then you also have, I need to create registers and voices, and I need to deal with slang. And one of the problems with translating slang is you run the risk, if you are not careful, of relocating the book.
Okay.
If it is very British, if it is very American, if it is very whatever. The lovely late Anthea Bell used to say that one should use non-specific demotic, but actually frequently what you do is you create a form of slang. And this is certainly true in Comrade Papa, and is to an extent true in Standing Heavy. But there's something else, and this is one of the things that I did think about is, and I still think, is that I am not necessarily the ideal translator for this book. Not because I don't think I can do it. And, you know, give me something that looks well nigh impossible and I'm there. But there is such a dearth of black translators, people of colour translators, from any language. And this is part and parcel of the fact that being a translator is a bit like a hobby. You're not expected to make a living. You're not expected to be recognised for what you do. It would be really too much space to put my name on the cover. And I don't mean that those individual things mean something, but you have in Britain, as in France, thousands upon thousands of people who are bilingual, who have what we call L2. And you don't get very many L2 translators, people who translate into the language they speak at home rather than the language of the society around them. And they should be encouraged to, but their parents don't, because actually we as a society do not encourage people to speak other languages when they are quote unquote in our country. And that is problematic. So, I mean, I'd like to think that, you know, I am working with a number of translators, both in Côte d'Ivoire and in Cameroon, who are translating. But we are a long way from having the necessary, the people to do so. Now, this is not. I'm not suggesting that A cannot do B and B cannot do C. I mean, if we were going to do that, then we would have to find somebody in Korea who's translating Gauz into Korean who just also happens to be. And also, there is a terrible tendency, and the French are very, very good at this, and it's one of the things that Standing Heavy is brilliant about lumping Africa together as though Africans are a thing. I mean, do you speak African? Would you like to be a little more specific? But in much the way that if you grew up Asian in the UK, people said, do you speak Indian? And they weren't using that as a way of saying Hindi. It was because they didn't realise that there were 70 odd major languages and then the minor ones.
Well, on that point, really, about like when you're translating, obviously you've translated you're saying from French, so it's not just books in France, it's books in Algeria and Cote d'Ivoire and numerous other places. How much of an immersion into the culture and the language and the rhythm of the language, like how much preparation do you need to do when you're diving into a book in order to do it justice, in order to do justice to Gauz's work or at least Senator's work?
Well, yeah, I mean, Gauz is useful because many, many years ago when I translated another Ivorian novelist called Amadou Kourouma. And because even before I read Comrade Papa, I knew by the way he uses language that he loved Émile Ajar, that he loved Romain Gary. So actually there is quite a lot there, but actually I will frequently do. Okay, so when I was translating the last complete novel that Amadou Kourouma wrote is called Allah n'est pas obligé. Allah is not obliged. And the full title is Allah is not obliged to be fair in all the things he does here on earth. And it is told through the voices of child soldiers who were forced into fighting. And the voices are really good. And he had spent time with child soldiers and they had asked him to write their story. And so I wondered what to do. And so in the end, I wrote to Human Rights Watch in New York. And I asked if they had any recordings of interviews with Libyan child soldiers. Sorry, not Libyan. What's just north of the Ivory Coast? Come on, help me out here.
Gauz.
Anyway, English-speaking child soldiers from just north. And they did.
Okay.
And so I played them, and I listened to them, and I listened to the rhythms, and then I used those rhythms. In the same way that, I spent, with Alice I've done a number of books from Algeria and a number of books about that period and about that time. But there are times when actually I will spend, the entire 6 months or a year, just listening to this kind of music or these kind of things, or, rhythm is very important to me. I translated a short story many years ago by Richard Alimuta, who writes in Lingala. I do not speak Lingala, but because there are very few people translating from Lingala even into French, what tends to happen is that writers will translate themselves. So he had done his own translation into French and it was sent to me. And I said, would you mind if I have a look at the Lingala? I said, I can't read Lingala, but I'd like to have a look. And he said, fine, sure, here it is. So this is the first paragraph. In the first paragraph in Lingala, there are 8 sentences. And in French, there are 2. And I wanted to understand why, and whether there is a process where you're trying to write French for French people or doing whatever. But also it's about sound. I remember asking a translator, I'm using the word translator in inverted commas now, so a poet who refashions poems based on what we call a crib. So I write down all the possible details that you could possibly want to know about the poem, and then you make up your own poem. And I remember saying, do you listen to the originals? Do you get someone to read them aloud? And he said, no, why would I do that? Well, I don't know. I mean, clearly not because you're humble or anything. So yes, there is an immersion, and every single novel is an immersion. The longer you spend with any novelist, the more you have access to certain parts of their head.
Sure.
So I mean, I can simply go out and
I think I write faster than I translate.
This is true. Well, you don't have to do any research, you know.
Well, actually, on that point, you obviously did do research for this book. So,
a lot of researches.
Comrade Papa just came out in English this year, just a couple of months ago, I think.
So beautiful.
And Gauz only saw it today for the first time, the
with
English cover.
the book. It's so beautiful.
I got to take a nice photo of you with it. So this book is, there's a kind of an interesting format to it, because there are two different protagonists. The first one we meet is a Newman, and he's in Amsterdam in, is it the 80s or 90s?
70s, late 70s.
Late 70s, okay.
There still has to be a dictatorship in Albania.
Okay, and he is sent by his parents to the Côte d'Ivoire to live with his extended family. So that's kind of one part of the story, and then we move back 100 years. Maxime Davilly, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
So he is moving from France. He's just been recently, his parents have both died, and he was training to be a priest, and leaves and goes off to the Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, to set up a trading post. And so we have those two storylines, and also immersed into the story are kind of similar in style to Standing Heavy, with the little vignettes. There's these mythologies, histories put in as well. So can you tell us about this book and the research you would have had to do for this and the idea behind it? A big question for a big book.
Yes, I don't think the question. I don't think that I have to say that this book is more complex, because it is not, but it was more complex to build it.
Okay.
To build it around two stories, very different, in two time, very different, even if at the end the both things are connected. But Comrade Papa is a question of immigration too. I think it is the first time someone take the colonization as a migration of people. A migration towards a better destiny, toward searching for richness, like every immigrant in the world. And that was my first idea. And it is this thing connects all my books. The migration of the human beings, and nobody talk about white people coming during the 19th century, coming in country they don't know, with disease, with animals, with niggers, you know, everybody against them, but we have all forgotten that people went there to have a better life for themselves and their family, stay in Europe. Mm-hmm. They went to Africa. Irish people knows that, but moving to America, the story were different. They were not colonizer.
No, we didn't get to colonize. We didn't have that power.
Yes. But French people, English people going to Ghana, Ivory Coast, they considered themselves. The whole enterprise was called colonization, but really, particularly, people move like migrants. Like this, they have the same purpose. They have the same idea of every immigrant of today moving to one point to another to change his destiny. Mm-hmm. You know, and that began by that was the point.
Story, yeah.
To deflate the history, the big thing of colonization. You were not a colonizer. Mm-hmm. a colonizer, you were lost when arriving there.
Yeah.
Humanize this thing and say to the people, that's what's really happened. Who come there, who were there, saying to himself, I am better, I am from a bigger civilization than this one around me in this bush. You know, that deflate this story and begin to speak about men, particular way of living. And in front of this guy who is a poor man, you know, we are in the Industrial Revolution. You know, we are into the creation of a labor class in Europe, and every time the poor people made the job for the rich one. Mm-hmm. You know, they made the job for them. So it was the poor people, as in the slavery, it was the poor people who were thrown into the ships. Mm-hmm. And they did the same thing they did during slavery. They take poor people to submit other poor people, mm-hmm. while telling them a great story about themselves. You know, you belong to the great civilization of you. No, there's no civilization. There's just rich people, you know, the bourgeoisie. We live into the dream of the bourgeoisie. These 4 last centuries, all this thing is come from just few people. Mm-hmm. If you wake up a noble from the 15th century and you show him the world, he will say, we have won. We come from God. Yes, they were right while saying to us, we come from God, our blood is blue, something like that. He will say that because everybody lives in this dream of the European class, you know, of these centuries. You know, they went to America for paper, just for the taste of a few people. But everybody has paper today. You know, that is, you know, just deflate the big story, mm-hmm. and concentrate on people, yeah. And then you have another relationship. So when I took this man from labor people, from, yeah. poor people, and it is true, it is true. And when I take this history of this man, I not opposition, but parallel, mm-hmm. Parallel, yeah. with an history of children, 11 years, mm-hmm. between 11 or 14, who make the same journey from Europe to Ivory Coast, mm-hmm. but 100 years later. And he was like a black boy, but not. He was black boy, but he was born in Holland, in Amsterdam. So, technically, he can be like every European who come in Africa searching for something. That was the thing. But later, I built the story in order to make them linked by the blood, yeah. Mm-hmm. Linked by the blood and the history. Yeah. Yes. And yes, and wipe away this color thing around racism just for the moment of a book.
What's fascinating is that Labidi, who's going out just after the Franco-Prussian War. I mean, he lost his parents. He worked in a munitions factory. And he is going out, and of course, you know, what he is being told is exactly what the kid living in Amsterdam is going to be told 100 years later, which is, you know, it's dangerous, it's savage, it's yada, yada, yada. Actually, he adapts and begins to understand and takes a genuine interest in the various peoples whom he manages to distinguish as being different peoples, and you know, their language and so forth. And these, of course, you know, when you say colonies at the time, these were not even countries. I mean, this is taking place at a point when the Gold Coast is about to fall apart, when Britain attempted to trade, and they wanted Côte d'Ivoire.
Yes.
And so they were prepared to trade Liberia, which nobody wanted, for Côte d'Ivoire. But the French very sensibly said, no, you keep Liberia. It'll be fun. It wasn't. And so a century later, you have this kid growing up in Amsterdam. So he is black, but there will be certainly Indonesians living in Amsterdam at the time, Dutch East India Company, etc. And he is, as he writes this book, effectively learning French. So he frequently makes a type of spoonerism or whatever. And that reminds me very much of La Vie d'en Soi. Momo in La Vie d'en Soi does precisely that. But frequently, the way that he does it actually makes more sense than the original. So his father is Comrade Papa. He is a staunch Marxist / Maoist
big Marxist.
Yeah,
You know.
who refers to his mother as only a bloody socialist. And she is currently studying Albanianism, so that she can go to the hallowed world of Enverhoga in Albania. And in the meantime, he's wandering around looking at the... so he's taught about, as it were, the original peoples, the Bonimaron, who are the slaves who either escaped and helped other slaves escaped in Suriname by a very large, very well-endowed prostitute who shows her gentlemen's all sorts, as he puts it, for all to see. And he is, when his father sends him off to Paris, of course he doesn't think of it as Paris, he thinks of it as the Paris Commune. Because that's the only mention he's ever heard of Paris was the Paris Commune. And he gets there and finds that it doesn't seem all that terribly revolutionary. You know, people, not much revolution. And then he discovers he's going to be sent to Côte d'Ivoire, where he has never been. So he is as much a migrant as Dabidi is a century earlier. He knows nothing about Côte d'Ivoire. And he gets there and he is looking at all of these strange customs, which are, of course, you know, a part, at least, of his heritage, about which he knows nothing. And Gauz manages to weave them together beautifully. And in between them, there are small pieces, fragments of legends or songs, which either he completely made up, or he found somewhere. I didn't want to ask, because I'd rather think that it sort of derived.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to finish up now because we're going to give time for questions. I have loads more questions I could have asked.
Yes,
I wanted to
of
talk
course.
about the Dublin Issue Award and I wanted to talk about the Booker Prize, but there is another event going on after our one, so we're under a bit of time pressure. But I would love to open it up to the audience if anybody has a question. Do we have a roving mic? Yeah, we have a roving mic.
Thank you. Oh, it's on. Okay. Hi. I wanted to say I have read only Début Payé, but I've read it in both languages.
It is good.
It is wonderful, and the rhythm and the art of it is something I really enjoyed, and I read them together. the two languages. So I saw the changes, and as anyone who grew up bilingual, I deeply distrust translations, but I also have a lot of respect for the people who make those choices. I wanted to know that after you have a book translated, do you find that affects how you write future books?
Come again?
When you're writing a book now that you've had books translated, when you are writing the original text, does it occur to you that this text will be translated, and does that impact how you write?
Non, elle veut savoir si je pense
si tu as changé ta façon d'écrire, en sachant que tu vas être traduit.
No way. I didn't. You don't even think about that. It is very, very complicated for myself to choose the language of the novel I am writing. You know, I begin to write. I have a lot of story in my head, a lot of things to tell, you know, but I begin to write while two conditions are filled. Mm-hmm. First, I have a structure. I'm like German, you know. I have a structure. The story is not a problem. I think for every writer, the story is not the problem. I can tell everything, every story, and make it a novel. Everybody can take every story and make it a novel. So it is not a big deal. But for me, the big deal is first find the structure. You know, you see the structure of de Beaupaillé. You know, right. you have to have the balls to take time to choose such a structure, because it is not classic. People can be dizzy or lost. You know, you have to be very clear with in what will you put in your story, and then after that you have to choose the language. You know, the language. You don't speak like me, I don't speak like you, and depending on the circumstances, I can have another voice, you know, another way to speak. So you have to choose, and you have to choose your language, the particularity of your language, and then begin to write. If you have to think about translator, you will die before finish the book, and it is the translator is not in the equation. So it is so true that in English I have been translated in Malayalam. You know Malayalam? I didn't know Malayalam before. They told me that I was translated in Malayalam. Malayalam is a language of a Kerala in India, spoken by 30 million of people. What?
Sixth largest language in India.
Yes. And what? When you have to think about the Malayalans while writing, you know? No, it is.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one more question. We have one more question, or are we happy to? Oh yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you want to go ahead and then we can? Yeah. If you keep it short, don't mind. Thank you.
Congratulations to both of you. I loved the books. I read them in French and English as well. And very funny and very insightful on the experience of security guards in France. It was great. But I wanted to ask Frank how you approach humour in translating, because there was a particular thing where the word sales or sale and salle. Mm-hmm. There was a play on words there, and it was very funny in French, but in English it doesn't come across, you know?
No, you can't.
And I was wondering, do you ever consider putting footnotes, or would that be...
Oh God, no. I will not put footnotes in a novel. Unless the author has put footnotes in a novel, I will not put them in a novel. I have, at the request of editors...
I will break your arm if you... if you do that.
I mean, we read...
What?
Look, probably everyone in this building has read Wolf Hall. you didn't understand the Antwerp market scene. You really didn't. Most of the things she describes, you don't even know what they are, but you read them anyway. So no one gets a footnote. You want to look something up, go look it up. What you do with humour is what you have to do, which is you move it. If I cannot play on this word, I will play on a different word. Slang is exactly the same. So, for example, in standard French, there is a perfectly standard way to refer to a woman that is not quite derogatory but exists, which is nana. Okay? There is no acceptable real word left in English. Chick is old and tired, and bird is English and very old. And so you can't do that. You have to do something else. Similarly, when I'm translating Virginie, she uses a lot of verlan. So, for those who don't know, verlan is basically Pidgin English. Oh, sorry, not Pidgin English, Pig Latin. You take syllable at the first, put it on the end, and you make a word. The difference is that Pig Latin is spoken by, 11-year-old public school boys, and verlan is largely spoken by North Africans and by black people within the rap community and so forth. And you cannot recreate that. It would be foolish to try. So you need to create slang somewhere else in the sentence that is not that. I can't remember what I did about sale at the end. I will have tried to do something because I had to. There is definitely a pun there and I needed to find one. So I will have found a way of doing it. But that will frequently crop up. I mean, one of the, standardly, difficult, quote unquote, difficult phrases to translate in French is on se tutoie. Shall we call each other by our first names? I mean, the thing is, if you no longer have a language that does that thing, you have to find a way of doing it. And frequently, you don't actually translate that phrase. You end up doing something else. You have them having something more formal and then something less formal. Humour is fascinating to do, but it takes...
Qu'est-ce que tu avais choisi comme les vendeuses de bisous? En anglais, tu as dit quoi?
Bisous?
Les vendeuses de bisous.
Oh, vendeuses de bisous. Yes, that's interesting. What do I call her? So she's called a kiss seller. Bisous is obviously, they're very small kisses, of the kind obviously that you would give to. Yes, I refer to as selling smooches. Which is perfectly nice, and smooch is the sort of word that he would use. But things like that, it really depends. I mean, obviously, puns by their very definition cannot be translated because whatever you're punning on is not going to be the... Well, actually, if you're in a Romance language, between French and Spanish and Italian, you're probably safe, but, anywhere else, and you don't. Basically, you have to recreate humour and do it as best you can, but there's no, it's a case by case, line by line decision.
Thank you. I think we've time for just one more question. To that lady over there, please.
Thank you very much. And I have a follow-up question to the first question. Actually, I'm not sure if I pronounce your name correctly. Is it Gauz?
Gauz. Like Frankie goes to Hollywood.
Perfect, Gauz. And you were mentioning structure, and my question would be, what do you mean by structure? Because I think it's a very wide or broad word. Thank you very much.
I mean by structure skeleton. The skeleton on what you will build your story, and you are. It is the lonely moment when you look like a god. It is a lonely moment. After that, you begin like a laborer. But the time I choose the structure, a structure like, do I begin by the hand or the hand? Something like. Basically, that is the structure. Begin by the hand, and what am I doing in the middle? Basically. But in Debout Payé, how do I put the Senate, the little description? How do I put them into a big classic. And so I decided to alternate, but by choosing a rhythm like a vertebral column, you know, tac, 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 and then poof, tac, 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 and then poof, in Black Manu, and for which Frank will have a lot of problem. I have decided to write short chapters of exactly 3333. 3,333 signs a chapter, because it was just random. I chose this random, and it was funny because I wanted my chapter to be just 2 pages, so that when you read, you begin here and you finish that. And to have this, you have to choose between 3,000. It is the average is between 3,000 and 4,000. So I choose randomly because it was fun, like say 3333 signes in French. It was just fun, and I decided that, and I stay on that. It was just not, no. My idea is to write sharp sentences, be precise, and count on the intelligence of a reader to finish the sentence I have begun. You know, so it's like a collaboration between the writer and the culture and the intelligence, I suppose, the reader have in heritage with me, something like that, you know, and just by convoking some few images, bim, you have and to do this, you have to be precise, and that is a structure. Not the last chapter. The last chapter were free, but because the history was simple. The history was simple. It is the Parisian chronicles of a former Parisian chronicle of an Ivorian former junkie. Simple. Who will die at the end of a book? So how do I bring this to that? And I choose this structure. And after that, a language, you know, and after that a language. And that is structure for me, you know. And it is important for me, not, I don't know for the others, but for me it is my German way. It is important it is very, very, it is fundamental for me. And
okay, thank you for that. Sorry to cut you short. It's just that we have another.
No, my fault.
We have another event. I just want to say a huge thank you to Gauz and to Frank for such an interesting conversation. I had loads more questions we didn't get to, but thank you both very much, and thank you all for coming this afternoon and for paying such close attention to the event.
Thank you. Yes,